Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the press call. Your host, Christy Campbell, will now begin.
Thank you so much, and welcome to the call. Thanks, folks, for dialing in today. We have with us Senator Johnson and Congresswoman Cathy McMorris Rodgers. I wanted to take an opportunity to talk about what President Obama, while he has not laid out his agenda for a second term, we know what it will include. It will include massive spending and more debt. So we wanted to take this opportunity to talk about that a little more today. Senator Johnson is going to kick us off.
Thank you, Christy, and hello, everybody, and thank you for joining the call. It's been very interesting watching these last three debates and the effect that that's really had in terms of Americans' perception on both candidates. And, from Governor Romney's standpoint, I think the debates have certainly underscored the fact that the President Obama campaign, the hundreds of millions of dollars that they've spent trying to paint this caricature of Governor Romney has been totally smashed. It's gone up in smoke. And, of course, President Obama's had a pretty tough time in those debates trying to defend a record that is almost impossible to defend. And, of course, what America has seen is in Governor Romney somebody who has a demonstrated capability of working with members from the other side. In Massachusetts, so working with a legislator controlled 87% by Democrats, while at the same time, unfortunately, we've watched President Obama, when he's faced with divided government, totally unable to lead. His last two budgets have received 3 votes in Congress. Final vote tally, 0 to 610. His proposals are so unserious that not even a member of his own party have given them a vote. And of course, the reason they're not getting votes is because of what they would actually produce. And, Governor Romney's done a very good job of pointing out really what has been the record of President Obama, particularly when we're talking about the debt and deficit. He's added $5.5 trillion to our nation's debt, and if he gets another 4 years, that debt will balloon to $20 trillion. He came into office promising that he would cut the deficit in half. He hasn't done that. He actually increased that original budget deficit estimate from $1.2 trillion to $1.4 trillion, followed by $1.3, and just this year we're going to experience another $1.1 trillion a year deficit. So that was a campaign promise that he has utterly failed to deliver upon. And, of course, the effect of all that debt, the American Enterprise Institute has just issued a study, and they took a look at what is the cost of servicing that debt that he's racked up and what he would rack up in another term in terms of increased taxes on the middle income Americans, and the result is an astounding $4,000. And I know President Obama loves talking about the tax cuts he apparently or supposedly gave to the middle class, but all those were temporary. Some tax cuts during the stimulus bill, which are gone. He counts as tax cuts the payroll tax holiday, which also expired. He doesn't talk about the tax increases on middle-income Americans caused by his health care plan, which currently total about $1 trillion in the current budget window over 10 years for health care. And, of course, you add to that the $4,000 tax increase that would be assessed to the middle class just to pay for servicing on his debt. You can see that his record is not one of success. It's a record one of failure. And if he gets another 4 years, why would he expect anything different? He certainly, I don't expect that anybody would really think he'd be able to lead. He doesn't have working relationships with any Republicans in Congress. I would argue that he doesn't really have working relationships with members of his own party, which is why the United States Senate, the body I serve in, hasn't passed a budget in over 3 years. All we're going to get out of another term of President Obama is more spending and more debt that is going to burden our children and grandchildren at levels that are simply unsustainable. So I certainly hope Americans take the opportunity on November 6th to elect a real leader that can reach across the aisle, that actually can work and has actually got a plan to enact across the board spending reductions of 5% on all discretionary spending, and understands that really a very dangerous metric right now is the fact that the federal government is consuming 24% of our economy, and Governor Romney is dedicated to bringing that down to the 50-year average of 20%. I think that's going to be crucial. So with that, I guess I'd like to turn it over to Congresswoman Cathy McMorris Rodgers, who's actually worked in the body that has actually passed budgets and has worked on Vice President nominees Ryan's plan on actually providing fiscal sanity to this nation. So, Congresswoman, take it over.
Great. Well, thank you, Senator. Excellent points. And both as a member of Congress, a member in the House right now, but also as a mom, I know that women, moms, all Americans are very concerned with the economy, the job opportunities, the fact that half of our college graduates right now are either unemployed or underemployed and moving back home with mom and dad. That's not the future that we want for our children. As someone who recently gave birth to my second child, when she was born, her share of the debt was $40,000, and under President Obama's policies and budgets moving forward, it now is $50,000, and that's not what I want for my children. When it comes to the economy, when it comes to the debt, we see what President Obama's policies. And speaking of the debt specifically, when he was campaigning, when he was first running for office, he promised to cut the deficit in half by the end of his first term. And instead, what we've seen over the last 4 years is a president who has presided over the largest deficits, record deficits in our country's history. 4 years of trillion-dollar deficits. That is not something that we've seen in the past. We've gone from right around $10 trillion in debt to now over $16 trillion in debt. That is not leaving a better country for our future, for our children. I think it was about a year and a half ago, Admiral Mullen, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was asked, what is the number one security threat that faces America? And he responded, it was the debt. The debt that we have, that we're taking on right now as a country threatens our national security, threatens the economic opportunities for our children. And as a mom and like millions of moms around the country sitting around the kitchen table trying to balance budgets, set priorities, we recognize that it means making tough decisions. But at a time when gas prices are going up and health insurance rates are skyrocketing, it makes it hard. But we expect our leaders to make the tough decisions, to get a budget in place at a minimum. The fact that this is now 3 years in a row that we haven't even seen a budget proposed out of the Senate. The president's budget got no votes. It's because there's not a willingness to really look at our fiscal situation, and instead it's just continuing to spend at a record pace. I too am proud of Governor Romney and his proven track record when it comes to tackling some of these tough issues. As a governor, he went in with a $2 billion deficit and turned it into a surplus. And he did it by working across the aisle. 87% of the legislature were Democrats, and yet they were able to get the job done. This Governor Romney has a plan. He recognizes it's going to mean making tough decisions, but he's a leader. He's proven that he knows how to provide the important leadership that we need right now when it comes to the economy, when it comes to jobs, and when it comes to this debt. There's two very different visions for our nation's future. And President Obama, unfortunately, doesn't have a record to run on or a plan for the future. And Governor Romney, Congressman Ryan are offering exactly what our nation needs, real reforms for a real recovery.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman and Senator. And with that, Operator, if there are any questions, we're happy to field a couple.
Yes, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, if you have any questions, please press the number 1 key on your phone. Again, if there are any questions or comments, please press the number 1 key on your phone. Again, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask a question, please press the number 1 key on your phone. Our first question comes from Steve Dennis with Roll Call. Please go ahead, sir.
Yes, thanks for doing the call. I'm wondering if you guys have any reaction to this Washington Post story, particularly the the talk of coming up with an alternative way to raise taxes on the wealthy so that the rates don't go all the way up to 39%. There are people talking about maybe a $55 billion tax increase for the wealthy that would come out of deduction, something similar to what Romney's talked about, except for without reducing the rates down to 28. And if there's concern, if these are the kinds of things that you're worried that you're going to have to face in the next couple of months if the president's reelected.
I'll quick hop in on this one in terms of raising taxes on anybody right now. Even President Obama 2 years ago said that'd be a really bad idea in a weak economy. And, of course, under his lack of leadership, our economy is even weaker today than it was 2 years ago. So as certainly one senator, I would oppose increasing taxes on any American. Of course, what Governor Romney is proposing is lowering the marginal tax rate, which is the incentivizing part of our tax structure. But for people in the upper 5%, people making over $200,000, you then also, in some way, shape, or form, limit the deduction so that they continue to pay the exact same share